Hello everyone, welcome back to another video for all you guys returning, and welcome to the channel for all you new guys. It is I, Shooter, back at it again. Finally, I actually had time to record. If you hear any like noise in the background, if you hear like a bird chirping or like a goat making some racket or something, I do apologize. I am currently recording this video outside. Because I didn't want to bother my family for once when I decided to record. So yeah, I hope that's okay. But before I get into the video, I want to say thank you guys for 300 subscribers. If you actually paid attention to the title, you'd probably know that's kind of what this is in celebration of. So yeah, we have 300 subscribers now. I apologize for not being able to get this video out sooner. I've been quite busy recently, so my bad for not being able to record and upload this. But alas, I finally had some free time. And one last thing I want to say before we get into the actual video itself is I want to thank one of my good friends, Owl of War, or as some of you might know him as Allosaurus the Mightiest Ever, or God Goji. I don't know what his username is. He changes it constantly. But old Owl of War, his birthday is today, or at the very least, it is the day I'm recording this. I don't know when this video is getting out, but regardless, at the time of recording this video, it is his birthday. So happy birthday, Allo. I hope you have a good birthday, and I hope this year treats you better than your prior. And yeah, with all that being said, let's get into the video. So I want to say that I'm going to talk about this fight twice. I'm going to first talk about how it would go, talking about the movie version of the Giganotosaurus versus the original Jurassic Park 3 version of the Spinosaurus. And then after that, I'll go over how the fight would go if it was the Camp Cretaceous version of the Spino rather than the Jurassic Park 3 version, and go over whether or not anything changes about the fight itself. And yeah, with that being said, let's start off with the very ugly duckling. So for starters, unfortunately, the Jurassic Park 3 version of the Spinosaurus, just simply due to how long ago this movie came out, really doesn't have a lot of scaling for inverse that we can, look at to properly judge his general realm of strength. There's a lot of old statements that are no longer valid, or that have been retconned, or that are just hyperbolic to begin with, that we really can't use due to their age, or due to inconsistencies and contradictions with other statements and feats. So, yeah, which leaves us with a really big problem, and that problem is the matter of consistency for where the Spino, or at least the the original version of the Spino in regards of, where it scales, inverse. So it's annoying the fact that we don't have more stuff on it that is still valid. And I apologize for those of you who were expecting me to spend 20 minutes on just the Spino. I'll drag it out as long as I can, but no promises. In terms of feats, the Spino only really has one on-screen feat that we can look at, and has two stated fights that we can kind of talk about, sorta, to kind of get an idea of how strong it is. The on-screen feat, of course, being when Snock fights the bull Tyrannosaurus Rex in Jurassic Park 3, and the two stated fights being its implied and as well as stated fights with Buck, as well as the Raptor incident. Starting off with the Raptor incident, as it's the one that's the most irrelevant, and I'm kind of going to be ignoring for this video for the sake of the Spino and the sanity of all of his fans. The Snock kind of almost dies off screen prior to the start of the movie to a pack of raptors. How many raptors it is, we don't know. It's not stated, nor is there any implication, meaning how many raptors it took to nearly kill him is not quantifiable, and anyone who tells you it is lying. But, yeah, he nearly dies to velociraptors at some unknown point prior to the start of the movie. I'm going to be ignoring this statement for, just keep some form of plausibility for him to win. As if I just said he dies to raptors, he'd kind of just get mogged by any big carnivore. So, yeah, we're going to be ignoring this for the sake of the Spino fans. In terms of his other stated feat, it's not really a statement specifically about the Spino. It's a statement about Bull, where it basically talks about how... Or not Bull, Buck, sorry. It basically talks about how Buck ran a gauntlet basically throughout all of the species that was on Isla Sorna in an attempt to impress Doe to be so that Doe would be his mate. It's stated that this applies to every species. Buck goes around and just lays hands on every species across the whole island and kind of murks at least one of everything. Now, we know he doesn't kill the Spino, obviously, because it's alive. However, it is stated by the end of his, kind of gauntlet run through the species of the island, he had at least beaten every species that lived there. Meaning we can say that, based off of this statement and the implications of the statement, Buck has probably not killed, but, beaten the Spino in a fight before. In a, 1-against-1. So we can say that the Spino, during the events of Jurassic Park 3, should be some unquantifiable amount weaker than Buck is in terms of general physicality, as he lost a fight to Buck. We don't know how this fight goes. There's no statements in regards to how the fight plays out. All we know is that Buck beat the Spino at some point, and with some amount of difficulty. So we know that the Spino should be some unquantifiable amount below Buck based off of this. But how much weaker exactly, it's implausible to tell, at least off of this statement. Which brings us to the only really quantifiable feat that the Spino has, and that is his fight against Bull. So, the fight doesn't go the way a lot of people says it does. A lot of people will gas up the Spino off this fight and be, kind of hyping the Spino up about how it just mogged the, crap out of Bull, and how Bull didn't put up really any fight, and how it was over in 2 seconds, and yada, yada, yada. And it really confuses me, because it's not how the fight goes at all. Throughout the vast majority of the fight's duration, Bull wins. In the first clash, he casually overpowers the Spino. He dodged several hits from the Spino throughout the fight and landed several really good ones. Based off of how the fight went, we can assume that Bull would likely be stronger than the Spino, if anything, rather than the other way around, as even though the Spino won, there's a bit of context that goes into how the Spino kills Bull that makes it a lot less impressive. And based off of how the vast majority of the fight went, Bull should be stronger, as he shows superiority throughout far more of the fight itself. But back to what I was saying about how the Spino kills Bull being unimpressive. For those who haven't watched the movie or just forgot somehow, the way that the Spino kills Bull is by snapping his neck. Now, it's not the snapping Bull's neck that makes this unimpressive, it's how the Spino does it. He has to use both his arms, his jaws, and by proxy, his shoulder and chest and neck muscle to break Bull's neck. And in addition to that, we can also see, based off of the position that both of them are in, the Spino is also using his weight and greater height both as to help his strength overpower Bull easier, as well as use it as his superior height as leverage to allow him to negate Bull's ability to use his own physical strength in return. This is further backed up by the unfavorable position that Bull is in during this, whilst Snock is breaking his neck. Bull is bent downwards. His body is in an awkward position that limits his ability to actually fight back and use his own physical strength. Now, you can argue this is just, battle intelligence and Snock's vastly superior experience, shining here, as obviously he is a very experienced fighter. But regardless, it makes it a lot less impressive in terms of physical strength, as he had to rely on a lot of very specific things to allow himself to overpower Bull, whereas he couldn't just brute force Bull like Bull was doing prior. As we see, when Snock tried to just brute force Bull, he was very clearly losing, and if the fight kept up that way, he probably was going to end up dying, as throughout the entire fight up until its very end, when he gets, a grip on Bull's neck, Bull is kind of mauling him the whole fight. He's very clearly showing superior speed, agility, and reflexes, and he is just blatantly shown to be much physically stronger than Snock is. So we can assert that the Spino should be some amount weaker than Bull. Not by some just massive amount, but he should be a amount weaker than however strong Bull is, which, once you look into how strong Bull is very unimpressive. Bull, in terms of statements, as we have to use statements because he has no feats other than dying to the Spino, and, how that whole fight plays out. In terms of statements, he is not very impressive. He has statements that say he's an apex of Sorna, meaning we can say that he should, as a baseline, upscale everything that doesn't have those same statements. But he's also stated to be, the weakest of the original Gen 1 Rexes, meaning he is weaker than Doe, Big Edie, Rexy, Buck, and, etc. He's weaker than all of the other original Gen 1 Rexes that we know of, which is really bad once you really think about it. For those of you who know anything about Zeb, you probably already know where this is going to end up going when I talk about Zeb. But generally, the Spino, in terms of physical strength, is pretty unimpressive, at least somewhat unimpressive when compared to Bull, who, although in the grand scheme of things is strong, in comparison to a lot of the other big things his size in the verse, Bull isn't that strong. Basically, long story short, Bull is weaker than the Tarbosaurus. I hate to be the one to say it, but the Tarbosaurus mogs, which is kind of funny, and I can't wait for the comments about that, but you get the point. Beyond this, the original Jurassic Park 3 version of the Spino doesn't really have a lot of other scaling statements or feats that we can use. So that's kind of where we have to end this. For a recap, he should be some amount weaker than Bull, some amount slower than Bull. However, he is a pretty experienced combatant in terms of, combat skill and intelligence. And he understands how to use his, height and weight against his opponents. And, utilize that to make up the difference in terms of physical strength in fights. And he seems to have some understanding of leverage, given the fact he uses it against Bull. But how does the good old Giganotosaurus compare to this? And I'm not going to beat around the bush. The original Jurassic Park 3 version of Spino is going to get pimp slapped by Zeb, and it's not even close. For starters, like, just as a baseline, we know that the Giga should be substantially stronger than Rexy, as he literally no-diffs her twice. In their main fight that ends, at the end of Dominion, Zeb beats the brakes off of Rexy. It's not even a contest. Rexy lands one hit that does absolutely nothing to the Giga whatsoever, and then she gets mocked the entire rest of the fight. She never lands a single other hit. She never dodges another hit after this. She never does anything to the Giga until she just gets laid out on the ground and then stepped on repeatedly. As, yes, the Giga does go on to knock her over and stomp on her head multiple times throughout the fight, which obviously is kind of just rubbing salt into the wound. We can assert that the Giga is a lot stronger than Rexy, just as a baseline. So with that said, we now have to turn to how strong Rexy is, and the answer is really, really strong. Rexy is stated to be the strongest Rex in the verse multiple times, and not only that, but prior to the events of Dominion, she is stated to be the physically strongest carnivore that lives on land. Now, obviously, this doesn't apply to the Mosasaurus, as it does specify terrestrial, but regardless, anything that lives on land, even partially, should get mogged by Rexy off of consistent statements that came out with quite literally every film. Every film where we saw a Rex, Rexy is stated to be stronger than that Rex. And she just, after the events and during the events of Jurassic World, she is just consistently stated to be way stronger than everything. So, yeah, Rexy is really, really strong. She also gets these same statements during Fallen Kingdom, which, is stated to be her at her weakest, meaning the weakest version of Rexy canonically is physically superior, blatantly, just stated so, to be superior to Snock and Buck, just by default. With Camp Cretaceous' release and with the discovery of Big Edie's existence, Rexy is also stated to be superior to Big Edie in every aspect relation to combat. So we can assert that Rexy is really, 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 really strong. A lot of people try to argue that Rexy during Dominion is her weakest form that we ever see because she's old. But the problem with saying Rexy when she fights the Giga is old is because there's no statements that, tell us how old Rexes can get in the Jurassic franchise. During the events of Dominion, Rexy should be 34 years old, which for a real-life Rex would be really old, but she's not a real-life Tyrannosaurus Rex, and there's no real dinosaur in the Jurassic franchise that is really realistic in any capacity that is at all relevant. So we can't really apply real-life logic and lifespans to them, as all of them are also genetically modified. Statements in regards to genetic modification in the Jurassic franchise say that all of them are enhanced, and Rexy is especially enhanced, as stated many times, meaning Rexy should be have a abnormally long lifespan compared to the already abnormally long lifespan of a Rex, which we don't even know the base starting point that's being multiplied off of, meaning we have no idea how old Rexy could have gotten. Meaning saying she's old is kind of stupid in a way, as there's no argument to say she is old for a Rex in the verse. So that argument is irrelevant. So, with that out of the way, Rexy is very clearly shown to be a lot more muscular and bigger and more robust during the events of Dominion. You can tell this simply by just looking at her model. She's very clearly far more healthy. During Dominion, we can also assume, off of things I've already said prior, as well as the fact that, Rexy during Dominion is in her prime. As it's stated so, for starters, things I've said prior should imply that she is the strongest in this movie, and things that have nerfed Rexy throughout all of her other appearances in the Jurassic franchise are no longer nerfing her. She isn't confined to an enclosed space that makes her less physically active. She doesn't have a ragged tooth. She isn't sick. She isn't malnourished like she is in literally every other appearance. So we see her throughout the entire verse. This is the only point in, the entire verse that Rexy isn't nerfed by at least 2 things. So, yeah, we can assume that this Rexy during Dominion is stronger than any other version that we ever see throughout the whole franchise, which should put her even higher above the Spino in terms of general physicality and overall combat abilities. And the Giga having no diff to this Rexy, you can probably assume how a fight between the Giga and the original version of the Spino would go. I don't really think I need to say it, blatantly, but long story short, Rexy is just consistently stated to be much stronger than the Spino is when in a weakened state. And when she wasn't in a weakened state and was at her prime that we saw, the Giga, no diffs her multiple times. So, yeah. The Giga just off of this should be substantially stronger than the Spino in terms of really all strength-related categories. Given the fact that the Giga is much younger than the Spino, we can assume that the Spino would likely be more experienced and potentially more skilled and intelligent in terms of, combat abilities. However, he really doesn't have a whole lot of feats beyond kind of basic things that would imply he's super skilled in combat. Yeah, you can argue he's skilled, especially so for a dinosaur, but he doesn't know, martial arts or something. He's not Godzilla, for example. And by comparison, the Giga does a lot of the same things in regards to battle intelligence and combat strategy, using things like leverage, weight, biting certain weak points of his opponents, etc., similar things to what the Spino does. So, if there is a difference in terms of their general battle intelligence and combat skill, it would likely favor the Spino, but it would be a very small difference. There wouldn't be, a super big difference. So, yeah, long story short, the Spino gets mogged by the Giga in a fight. And, but, does the Camp Cretaceous stuff and all the stuff that the Spino gets in Camp Cretaceous change anything? No. It changes nothing. The Spino during the events of Camp Cretaceous is stronger than it was during Jurassic Park 3, my bad. We know this as it uses less strategy-based, combat styles against a stronger Tyrannosaur, but generally therefore meaning the Spino during the events of Camp Cretaceous, unlike his Jurassic Park 3 counterpart, isn't a fraud. He isn't super weak. He isn't garbage anymore during Camp Cretaceous, but he's not Giga level. He's still stated to be weaker than Rexy is. He shows general relativity to Big Edie in terms of raw physical strength, who, as I said prior, has a statement saying she is inferior to Rexy on all fronts, meaning Rexy during Dominion in a fight would probably still beat the Spino 1v1, and you could probably imagine how a fight between the Giga and the Camp Cretaceous Spino would go based off of that. So, yeah, nothing really changes no matter what version of the Spino that we're really talking about. So, yeah, the Spino gets fried, no matter what version you're really using. But is there any situation where the Spino can win? And honestly, I don't think so. Even if you were to place both of them in water where the Spino should naturally have an advantage, he's more mobile in the water than he is on land. whereas Zeb is nerfed in the water because, you know, water, he isn't as fast, he can't hit as hard when he's in the water due to water resistance. You get the point. And even in water, I really don't think the Spino could win either. I mean, I think it would be plausible, as there's a statement that says he is capable of harming the Giga, meaning we at least know he is capable of, like, somewhat, kinda, sorta harming the Giga, at least a little bit. But, I mean, the stat gap is still so big. The Giga is still much physically, like, in terms of physical strength, he's still much stronger. And he's still much more durable. He's far more robust. I still think the Giga would probably win just off of raw stats. So, yeah. Long story short, the Giga Mogs. Any of y'all on my channel that's been on my channel before, y'all remember that one video I showed you where it's the Loki versus Hulk scene from the original Avengers movie? Y'all remember that, but it's replaced with, you know, the Indominus Rex being Loki and the Giga being Hulk. Any of y'all remember that? That's basically what this is, except you replace the Indominus Rex with the Spinosaurus, and the Giga is still Hulk in this situation. The Giga would get one bite on the Spino and then kind of just ragdoll it around, slamming it into things. And that is if it doesn't just break its neck or just stomp it to death, which are also highly likely plausibilities. So, yeah. Long story short, Zeb Mog's bad, and there's no real way for the Spino to do much of anything about it. Oh boy, I can't wait for all the comments about this one, about how I'm stupid, and about how the Spino could solo the whole verse, and yada yada yada. If any of you are like that one guy, I don't remember what his username is, but if y'all are like that guy, I'll show an image, and for all of you, if you know, you know. If you're that guy, bro, just get out of my comment section. I can't wait for that one guy. Aloe knows who I'm talking about. He'll know. Aloe knows. Y'all can ask him in the comments, because I know he's gonna watch this. Y'all can ask him if y'all want details, because it's really funny, actually. But, anyway, I hope y'all enjoyed this video. I know all the Spino fans did not, but regardless, I hope y'all enjoyed this video, and I hope you learned something, and happy birthday to Aloe once again. Thank y'all for 300 subscribers, and yeah. That's all I got for this one, folks.